This was a few years back, but still a goodie. I wasn't on speaking terms with one of my brothers, and for good reason. He tried to start a fist fight with my now husband, and his wife threatened to shoot me. At the time, we were engaged, and I made it clear to both my brother and the rest of the family he wasn't invited to the wedding. However, my mother took it upon herself to reach out and say she talked with him and he and his wife promised to behave. I reminded her he was absolutely not invited, she had no right to do that, and she needed to call him back and make that known. Her response? But he's your brother, and to think of the family. To make matters worse, we were receiving a lot of pressure to pay for an open bar, and we don't even drink ourselves, as well as pay for a bigger venue even though we wanted a small and more intimate wedding. Where was this pressure coming from? Why, none other than my alcoholic mother, who wanted to invite a bunch of relatives I've never met and take advantage of an open bar. Now here comes the fun part. I was at my wit's end with all this family drama. So one Monday evening a couple months before the wedding, the following conversation took place. What are you doing tomorrow? Me. Hanging out with you, why? Now husband. Want to get married? Me. Are you serious? Hell yeah. Now husband. And we did. We eloped with just us and a couple of friends that offered to officiate the wedding that Tuesday evening. We saved thousands upon thousands of dollars, didn't have to deal with all the drama, and had our small and intimate wedding that we wanted. Honestly, I wish we had done this to begin with. However, my mother lost her shit. Posted all over FB seeking pity about not being at her daughter's wedding and how could I do that to her, etc. etc. Funny how she didn't mention any of the above details in her post and made it all about her wants and woe is me. Even more funny is we would have had the wedding if she would have respected our decisions. So no, you don't get to invite unwanted guests, make demands, or get to go to our wedding. Sael is the kind of mom that always has to one-up other kids. She constantly talks about how her kids are smarter, taller, faster, etc. than her friends' kids. She literally bragged about them being more than her friends' kids when they were babies, lol. It was worse when my husband and I had our twins. Suddenly everything was a competition, that her kids always won. One of my girls rolled over at 4 months, her son had rolled over when he was just a week old. The twins both took their first steps around 13 months, her daughter was running at 4 months. She didn't actually start walking until around 16 months. She even changed the weight of her kids' birth weights, which makes them both heavier than the current heaviest newborn in America. It's so weird that she feels the need to tell such obvious lies, especially to people who know she's lying because they were there when her kids were small. I got annoyed when she went from lying about her own kids to telling me there is something wrong with mine. The girls are a few months shy of 2 and they're both healthy, on track and hitting their milestones. Sael has become obsessed with the idea that there is something wrong with them because they're not speaking in long sentences. Of course they're not even 2. They're both developmentally on track, but she insists that her children were speaking in 5 to 6 word phrases by 18 months. Spoiler, they were not. Honestly, her son is almost 7 and I can still barely understand a word the kid says. My husband and I ignored her, but she took it too far when I got a call from her friend who works in early intervention who was under the impression I was very concerned about my children. We talked and her friend confirmed that yes, they are on track and no, there's nothing to worry about. I finally lost my patience. Hey, her kids are breaking almost every record there is and that should be celebrated. We had dinner with my husband's family on Saturday, kids were in another room, and I decided it was the perfect time to give her my gift, a booklet I had printed and laminated called the White Claw Book of World Records. I printed all the supposed milestones of her kids, complete with photos and info of the actual world record holders now that they had been pushed to second place. She flipped through the first couple of pages, went beet red and called me an asshole. Her husband took it from her and got through the first page before laughing hysterically and asking her why the hell she was still lying. Apparently, it was not the first time they'd talked about her lying about their kids. She stormed out but texted me later that night and asked why I'd humiliated her when all she'd ever tried to do was help me get my kids the help they needed, but if that was how I wanted to treat her then she'd stop. So I guess it's a win for me. 3 years ago, I was fired from a stained glass studio where I worked as an artist, glass painter and designer, for being vocal about company safety. The owner made me the safety person because I had come from a studio that took safety seriously. I read OSHA manuals and gave so many suggestions about unsafe practices we had in the studio handling lead, acid, and other dangerous materials. After a few years of my suggestions being mostly ignored, someone, actually not me, called OSHA during COVID when my coworkers were not masking. The boss suspected it was me since I was the most vocal about safety, and they rehired my replacement shortly after, removed my safety person duties, and fired me after enough time had passed that it wouldn't look suspicious. They cited lack of work but had just hired someone and were firing me instead? It doesn't add up. All in all, this was a place where my contributions and expertise were largely unacknowledged and unappreciated. At the time, I had been pursuing my own work as an artist. When I was fired, I had no idea how or if I would be able to make ends meet in Los Angeles, but I did. In fact, this firing was the best thing that could have happened for my career. Last night, I saw this boss/owner at an event. The studio is doing so poorly that he had to cut everyone's hours to 2 days a week. Many people are looking for new jobs. He said, "I heard you had a show, and yes, I actually have a solo show up with a major gallery, have more than $30,000 in savings, and so much work on the horizon I'm booked through 2026. I said, "Yes, things are going really well," and flashed him a huge smile. Success is truly the best revenge. Edit, obviously did not expect this post to go so crazy, thanks to everyone who is sharing their own stories of living well after being fired from a bad job/toxic workplace. The #1 comment I'm getting is, "Who tells someone how much they have in savings, lol." I didn't. I only said the part in quotes. The other information is for you, the reader, to know to help you understand where I'm coming from. Honestly, I'm appalled at how many people lack basic reading comprehension skills, but here we are. Also, obviously this boss didn't tell me how bad the studio is doing. I learned that from former coworkers I saw at the event. The crazy thing is he literally cut hours that day, so everyone was still quite upset. Again, all that was said is in quotes. Edit. Since so many people assumed this happened in the States, I just wanted to say that I'm from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you are a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you, you cannot do it here. You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have a prior history of failed companies or you've broken the law in some regard, you are blacklisted at that establishment. / First post, so be gentle with me. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day I was coding big-ish custom websites was a rental company. Now I had heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing and conniving. He was a lawyer after all. So, I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent, renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot, nothing out of the ordinary there. So we make a pretty good deal on paper, we sign it, and I get started on the project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands suddenly that I show him progress only a week into the progress. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agree to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum and start working on the design now. Now, the contract stated that I was given free reign of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I make a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a Macromedia product, before the Adobe acquisition, and within 2 days I show him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout, with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go. A never-ending circle where he is never happy with anything. Now close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the back end. I point out that he himself changed the order in how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back-end as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, "Yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working back-end to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism." Okay, I now have 12 days to do a back-end for the site. So I get a friend to help me and we work tirelessly through a weekend and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point he is only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, well, if you can't honor the contract, why should I? Finish XX work and then I'll pay as per the contract. Remembering now all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decide to add a special function to the code just to be safe, more on that later. So, now it's the end of the month, we have a front-end design he is okay with, a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512-bit/s upstream from the server it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay and the demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front-end and back-end, I can see he's immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He is trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly and his eyes gleam with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyway, he now says that it's way too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong. Blah blah blah. Client, I want you to put it up on my prod server and see how the speed is. Me, okay, no problem, I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. Okay. I wait a few days and then I get an email from him where he includes a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his prod server so he can take a look at it, under beta.hisdomain.tld, I then send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supplied credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with the transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. Pro Revenge 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, his user, tries to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the config first, the system will first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in the web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. Pro Revenge 2. Since it is considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. Pro Revenge 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew he was now blacklisted from owning a company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning and for working for just over 5 months on this project that is hardly anything. But the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of